Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special meeting of the City Council of the City of Pearsall to be held today, Tuesday, January 30th. The time is 7:01. Manager, roll call, please.
Mayor Mary Moore,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Julian Hernandez,
Here.
Councilmember Patty Gifford,
Here.
Councilmember Amora Gasa,
Present.
Councilmember Brenda Trevino, Councilmember Robert Bedia,
Present.
Councilmember Ben Briscoe,
Here.
and Councilmember Chris Valadez.
Here.
We have a quorum, so let us stand for our invocation as well as our pledge of allegiance. Mr. Costello, please.
Heavenly Father, we come before you, Lord, as each and every one here is gathered, Lord God, as sons and daughters of the living God, seeking your guidance, seeking your wisdom. Lord God, thanking you for the service that the council offers to the city of Pearsall, thanking you for the service that companies and individuals offer to the city of Pearsall to make it a better place. Thanking you, Lord God, for the work, wonderful work that our city manager is doing, and Lord, for all the employees. We pray you bless this meeting this evening. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty, item 4 is workshop. Need to entertain a motion to open the workshop, please.
Motion to open.
All in favor?
Aye.
Workshop may begin.
Madam Mayor, Council, to start with tonight, I'm just going to have Robert kind of give you an update on where we're at. It's been a while since we got together and talked about the bonds because we had the street utility program actually going. And so it was just been updates. I mean, everybody could see the work that was happening, but now we're reaching the end of the work that we had scheduled under that street and utility project. We're actually really close to the work we had scheduled being done. And so now we have a little bit better handle on some budget numbers and some other items. So I'll have Robert give you an update first, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the next step is.
Before we get started, for the record, Councilwoman Brenda Trevino, right, 704. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. For the record, Robert Vieira with LMB. So we're coming to the end of the street and utility project. The original contract is approximately $3.2 million. We have realized savings of approximately $650,000. So what we're proposing under the street and utility project is to add, you have it before you, and I know the numbers, as the councilman just talked, the numbers they're not quite right. It's off by $5,000. So what we're proposing with the savings that we're going to realize under the existing contract, we're recommending to mill and overlay Hatbury Street and Encino Drive, and also replace the services on Encino Drive. Looking at mill and overlay North Willow from Athol all the way to Colorado. But if we're going to mill and overlay Willow Street, we want to address the water line and also the trunk line. Now the water line will be covered under the existing contract that we have with T Construction, and that falls all within their existing contract, all based on the savings that we're going to realize for that project. But the sewer trunk line on Willow Street will be covered under the sewer trunk line budget line item, and that will be bid out separately. So these items that we're talking about here, we're just looking at continuing the work and going to meet the existing contract that we have, or use up all the funds that we have with the existing contract with T Construction. One other item that we're looking at is, through a small purchase, is the sewer line on Peach Street from Trinity to Alabama. So we'll go out and get quotes for replacement of that sewer line. So really what we're here asking for the okay from council is to continue to use T Construction for this additional work that we're looking at, that we're recommending. And then next week sometime, we'll advertise the gas line project that's under the bond. And the next couple of weeks, that's when we'll come out with the trunk line on Willow Street.
Okay,
If there's any questions or...
on Encino Drive, the water connection lines.
Those are just the services.
Okay.
that need to be replaced. If you're gonna fix the road, the gas line, the water line are all in good shape. It's just the services that are crossing the road that need to be replaced. And initially, the intent was to have the city do it, but since we have funds left over, or within the budget for the street and utility project, we're just recommending to have the contractor go ahead and do them.
And Willow is infrastructure and,
So Willow Street, it's mill and overlay, that's mill and overlay, that's the street portion. But we're also looking at replacing the water line. And I think that's only from Peach to Colorado, right?
From Colorado.
So Peach to Peña. So from Peña to Athol, that water line's already been done. But we're looking at
All of
so brand new water line, all of Willow, and mill and overlay Willow, and then also the sewer trunk line under Willow.
So Mayor, if I can, before we go any farther, so the first item you have on there, Hackberry and Encino Avenue, that was the adult that we did on the original bid that we put out. The water services, of course, and the reason that Encino was included in the original one, and I think Mr. Vieira's pointed this out every time we talked about this, the city in 2014, there was a 2012, when the city got the CDBG bond, or the CDBG, USDA loan to do all that infrastructure up there, that street was basically a brand new street, and the city tore that street up to put the sewer line down that street, and those people were promised that that street was gonna be put back down, it never was. So, we have discussions where we talk about what was promised in annexation or what was promised where. That's the one promise I do know of, that the city's never kept to the citizens there. So those citizens, in their subdivision, they basically paid for a brand new street in their subdivision. It was annexed by the city tore up the street and never went back in there and gave a new street. So that's why we included it in the original one. So those were included as add-ons to the original bid that we put out. However, I had L&D go back to the company because we did have the savings. It's like, well, if we had savings on everything else, then maybe it should be a little bit lower number on this too. And they actually did come back with a lower number to do those two streets than what was original. I think the original bid was 169.
169 for two-core seal coat, so you get a better product.
Yeah, so this is a lot higher quality street at a lower price than what we had in the original bid. North Willow, we didn't really talk about Willow at the time that we started all this because we hadn't really got to moving forward with the trunk line. Now, if you remember all the way back to when we had the two breaks and we had all the TCEQ problems and everything else that happened, that main trunk line for our sewer system runs right down the center of North Willow. So that was so the trunk line project that you guys already approved was that trunk line. So we're gonna have to tear up that area to do that trunk line anyway. So, and probably one of the busiest streets on that side of town is Willow because of the school. The streets are pretty bad shape. We get a lot of complaints about Willow. And so while we're tearing it up to do all this, it's like, well, let's just look at going ahead and putting in a new water line, getting it done and finishing it up too. So that we're not tearing up another one and leaving something unfinished, because when we do the trunk line, it's gonna tear up the road. And so if we don't do the street too, then we're gonna hear about that after we get done. So, and because of the amount of traffic, because of school, all that traffic to the school flows on Willow, that's why Willow got added into that's why we're recommending Willow be the next one and stuff, with the money and stuff.
And it might come up, well, why are you addressing Encino, just so that everyone's aware, that is, because I know once we pave it, somebody's gonna come and say, well, why are you paving Encino, and then of course, one of the council members lives on that street, so it is something that was originally planned for this project. It was a promise that was made a long time ago, and since we have funds remaining, we're looking at adding it back into the project.
I have a question though.
One second. Willow gonna be done during school. Is that gonna be a problem for the buses?
We've worked with the contractors pretty well around their schedules. So like when they come and do the heavy work as far as like the overlay, they can do it on Saturday, so we can work that in.
Okay.
For the overlay. Usually when anything else was done between like 9 and 2. So any of the milling can be done within those time periods, also not affected at all.
What about we're gonna pipe burst that, correct?
Pipe bursting is a different story. We're gonna have to have flagmen coming in there when they go in between I mean, Peña and 808. But that's pretty good also, they can have a flag and then they can have a barricade. It's only gonna be certain areas, like where they dig their holes, where they have to.
Yeah, it's not gonna be that long. There is gonna be some, I mean, there's gonna have to be coordination,
Yeah.
and Rick and the contractor are gonna have to work with the school and try to at least notify when there's gonna have to be.
Yes, that's,
It's just like anything
I was
else.
getting a lot of messages when you guys were over by the middle school.
I mean, that's just part of, whenever there's
I know,
construction, there's
but-
always gonna be some kind of.
Just make sure you notify them. I mean, that's the thing, you know, if we were, if you guys were to approve. Yes, Robert?
The water line services on Encino, what does that all entail?
That's just from the main line to the meter, or replacing those service lines. Because those are in bad shape. I can't remember what material they were, they poly or?
It was some kind of black poly.
Some kind of black poly that was put in a long time ago. So if we're gonna pave the street, we just wanna make sure that all the infrastructure under that street is in good shape.
So we'll have to tear it up.
Yeah, you don't wanna have to go, to pave the street and go back and tear it up. And that's the reason we're also replacing the water line and the trunk line on Willow Street. If we're gonna pave the street, we wanna address the infrastructure.
And that was one of the big things we talked about when we started this, if we do a street, let's make sure everything underneath it's done, so those streets last 15 years. We get them. We did talk about the small purchase, the sewer line on North Peach Street, that's probably the worst sewer line we have in town. It's a small section, 800 feet, Rick,
785.
785 feet. Our guys are constantly out there trying to work on that. You're not supposed to go more than 500 feet without having a manhole, and that's basically almost an 800-foot stretch that doesn't have a manhole. And so that's why we have so many problems.
Sir?
I thought you guys told us that we addressed the priorities when it came to sewer lines. And now you're saying that's the worst one we have?
Well, it's not, when we
What
talk
was the
about,
story?
when we talk about priorities, we're talking about clay lines. This isn't a clay line, I don't believe.
Yeah, this,
It's just because we don't have that manhole in between, our guys end up out there jetting that thing quite a bit, because of what happens in there. It's not a priority as far as it's gonna bust and leak and we're gonna have a TCEQ violation. But it's something that we end up spending an extra amount of time working on, because it's not built the way that it should have
And
been.
if you recall, the priority system was sorta, and we linked it to the streets also. So we just wanted to make sure if we're gonna address the streets, if we're gonna work on the street, that we address the water and the sewer line. I mean, that's really what we want to do now, so that we don't have to come back and, you know, if there's a utility break, then tear up the street. So. But I think that Peach Street, is that just something that
That's something that started recently.
just more recently than?
yeah, that one just started within the past year. They've come in there, they've two major repairs, and every time they go in there, they open up, it just starts.
It's clay, and if you open it up and you try to tie onto it somewhere, it's just gonna keep on breaking. So,
And basically the same thing's happening to us there on Peach Street, what happened before with the repairs on the two that led to the violations. We would repair a section of it, but then you agitate the earth around it and the clay tumbles
yeah,
outside of
it's
the
just so brittle, I mean, if you touch it, it just breaks.
What about South Moreno? South Moreno, that street.
South Moreno,
Have y'all driven there?
I have not, I can't say I have.
Okay, the water jumps the curb over there. Remember we talked about this at
Oh,
one
yeah,
time?
yeah, on Moreno from the.
And it goes into the neighborhood there, and some of those residents are under water sometimes, and so the street is taking a pretty good beating. There's lots of potholes, it's a pretty bad street.
Is it worse than Willow? High traffic.
I think it's, well, there's only two outlets from those neighborhoods, and that's one of them, I think. And I don't think it's that long of a stretch. I think it's like, what, three blocks maybe?
Yeah, about 3 blocks. What we try to concentrate was on the high traffic areas, and that's one of the reasons of the streets that we're looking at right now. I mean, there's other streets that need to be addressed, that's why we have that whole street assessment. We
So-
still need to tackle, but we're just,
So Encino Drive is high traffic?
part of it, yeah, I mean,
Well, it's just a promise. I used to live there, and I was there when they messed it up. And the last regime did promise. And since we do have monies, we should fulfill their promise. About the other ones, we need to bring them to light if there are other promises out there, which I do not know.
We do need to get
The list of the,
somebody out to South Moreno, because there's
South Moreno.
lots of potholes. It's pretty bad.
yeah, if,
I don't, we don't have any.
Well,
just look at it
I can look at
and
it.
see if you guys can make an adjustment.
The
in your-
infrastructure might be okay.
No, we can make an adjustment in numbers, that's not it, we just need direction from council. If you want us to look at South Modelo and add it to the contract, we can do
Yeah,
that.
if there's money in there.
Because that's where I remember the senior citizens sent me pictures, I still have them.
Yeah, the water has done a number on that. It's just like 3 blocks right there in that little stretch.
Mayor,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
a couple questions. Thank you, Robert. And Tink, is the savings, is it budgeted or is it real? I mean, we paid all the expenses and that.
It's real.
It's, the bond money's still sitting there.
It's because when we put out a bid, it's all based on unit prices, and if we don't use up all the units, once we measure the quantities and everything, if they're not, if there's a savings in quantities or other words, then we don't pay that out to the contractor. So the original contract was $3.2 million, and we were only gonna spend, we spent less than that, approximately $650,000.
And so that was my follow-up was, so like how exactly did we capture that? I mean, so we captured those savings by how?
So the bid went out and we encumbered that amount. So $3.2 million was the bid. But as they finish the project pieces and we've got bills, they're not billing to an amount. They're billing based on actual work, actual parts bought, actual equipment purchased, actual asphalt bought, whatever. And we now know what their last invoice is gonna be. We found that today. So we know what their last invoice is gonna be, and there will be no more invoices on that project after that, and so it's the difference between what we spent plus that invoice and what we have budgeted.
So on the actual bid, there was actual water line unit prices, like so much for linear foot of sewer line, water line, and then square yardage on the amount of hot mix we're putting down there overlay. There was savings in those items, so from the 3.2, there was savings. In other words, we didn't install that amount of water, sewer, or I think the majority was on the overlay, was it savings?
The overlay and some of the services.
Some of the services, yeah.
Okay.
So we
If
have.
that makes sense. In other words, when we put out the initial bid, we estimated the quantities, square yardage of overlay of the street work. Well, when Rick goes out and they've completed the work, we measure those quantities again and just pay them for the actual work that has been installed.
Okay. And then one follow-up on Encino. Yes, I heard that, but kind of what Julian is saying is, I heard him say, yeah, that was part of the deal. It was gonna get paid, but just looking at again the priorities, and that street doesn't get the use that some of these others and/or some of these lines that are just non-existent. And so I would just, I don't want to direct what happens on that street anyway, or vote on it in any way. But I would just say, or as council, maybe consider things that where it might. So I guess roughly half of that, whatever that is, $80,000, $77,000. If it's half of that cost, could be used to put in something that's really bad.
We can look at what else we can.
And remember, the other thing here, the numbers that are before you, we're basically estimates again. We think they're a little bit closer, but they're probably still a little bit over as well. I mean, they're not gonna underestimate what they give us. So we finish this portion of it, there may be some savings in this portion too that still gets redirected someplace else. We shouldn't be coming in over budget, we should be coming in under budget. And so what the actual savings ends up being, we don't know, but there may be some savings in there as well that gets directed another direction as well. The other thing that you can do, you guys also have the rest of the bond budget in front of you. The other thing you can do is say, yeah, we want to do this, but add in rental too. And let's take it out someplace else.
I think we can cover one, because there's still a little bit of money that's needed today. I'm pretty sure if that's the direction of the council, I'm pretty sure we can cover what it is.
It's just that the water
I'm
is,
positive.
whenever it rains, it's just taking a toll on that street.
Just
I have a question. Moreno Street, prior to it being resurfaced, actually it was Trevino Street. What was done on Trevino Street, did that directly affect what is happening on Moreno Street at this point? Because before, I don't recall it ever flooding to the point that it is now. And if it is, somebody should be held liable for the work that was done on Trevino Street. So I'm not quite certain how that has transpired. If it started when that project, when they did work to that street, you know?
No, I mean, as far as, in fact, the work that took place on Trevino, those areas, which is
Again, we did a drainage improvement where now we have underground culverts that alleviates a lot of the flooding around there.
So it
She's next.
it helped the situation on Moreno Street. I don't, is that the way, because it flows over and it goes down
It goes through those,
to a backyard or whatever it is?
Well, he's asking, go
it
ahead.
goes through those little houses and then ends up on South Moreno.
Yeah, the instance I remember when that occurred, there was a big rain, and I think it surcharged the TxDOT drainage pipe. So that couldn't get out, and then it went over the curb and through the property, right? Is that,
Yeah, that's what I remember.
that's what I remember.
Every time we've had a good little rain, 3 inches is good around here. I've gone out there and it jumps the curb. I mean, some of it's getting to the drain, but it's also jumping the curb, and that's the part that's going into that neighborhood.
So that's the-
What I would recommend, and we've had this conversation, I think, because that apartment complex, and somebody needs to look at, because all that water from that apartment complex is pumped into the street. So I don't necessarily know, because before in the past, that wouldn't happen if I remember. The only thing that was added was underground storm sewer, which helps the situation. Doesn't hurt the situation.
Were the apartments there, Robert?
Yeah, the apartments have been there for, geez, 20, how long have the apartments been there?
Well, we've actually had one of the landowners there
Oh, yeah.
complaining because, you know, man, I can't do anything with this because all that water comes out from that apartment straight to my property.
So I mean, nothing's changed really. In fact, it's only been improved. So there has to be something else contributing to the situation, is what I would say, but.
The water's missing the drain.
Is there a chance that drain's plugged? Or partially plugged or collapsed or?
It could be, we could look at it, but like I said, there's,
What I've seen is the water just doesn't get to the drain, it goes into the neighborhood.
Could it have been a deficiency? As far as the contractors?
I don't think, because because there was an addition of underground storm sewer. And I'm saying, there was nothing there before. There was no underground storm sewer there before. I know TxDOT made some minor improvements, but in order to, the situation has always been that there was no storm water before. We added in curb and gutter and storm water, underground storm water, so which only improved the situation, which helped alleviate getting the water out of the street and into the drain. It crossing the curb and over the property as being a new occurrence, I don't see how adding the curb and gutter and the underground storm sewer would affect that situation. Does that make sense?
You have a question, dear?
I think there's something else that's probably adding, if that's the case, there's something adding more water than was there before, rainwater.
I have a couple of questions, and Council, forgive me if this has been asked in previous meetings, but when you say West Colorado and Apple Lane, do you mean the intersection on West Colorado or the north end of Colorado up to Apple Lane?
I need to clarify.
Okay,
Are we gonna go through,
we're gonna go, you know, where the stop sign,
It's a four-way stop sign.
South Willow?
It's the south end of North Willow.
Yeah, the south end of North Willow, where it offsets.
So on this side?
Yeah, on this side, yeah. I actually told him to give me a bid to go about 20 feet behind on South Willow. You know that
And-
intersection is really messed up?
Yes.
So it's gonna bring it up all the way up.
Okay, is there any reason why it's not going all the way to Gomad
It's
on
just-
North Willow?
It's just the money.
the amount
It's
of
just
money we
money.
have?
I'm funding it.
What is the thickness of the milling overlay on the, how much higher is it gonna bring it from the?
Inch and a quarter, inch and a half.
But what she's asking, I think, is the road gonna be higher?
Yeah, and how are you gonna transition that?
No, so that's what the milling takes. The milling, you mill off so much, the inch and a quarter, inch and a half, and then you just go back with the new overlay, the new mountain.
So it's the same elevation.
So it's the
And
same
is-
elevation, yeah.
And is
But
that,
you create a better crown on it, though.
And is that milling perhaps with the user in future, does that, where that seam is that gonna start breaking off and causing?
Or where you overlap the two, the.
Where they
hot mix?
meet, where you have the seam? Okay.
What, and I mentioned this earlier, with, you know, that, there's one thing with hot mix, I mean, it's a better driving surface and everything else, but there's maintenance associated with it also. I mean, over time, that hot mix is gonna crack, and it needs to be sealed. I mean, if you drive down textile highways or any street that has hot mix, over time it cracks, and the only way to extend that life, to make sure that water doesn't get down into the base, is by routine maintenance, and that's just putting the tar in the cracks and things like that. So,
Okay.
but as far as it coming apart at the seam, that should happen.
And how much is left from that point to Comal? Not very much.
Yeah, 3 more blocks.
Three more blocks. Two or three. Do we
Yeah,
have
very
a,
much.
but do we have a sewer and a water? I don't know. That's something we need to look at, because we're looking at doing all the infrastructure. So if there's a sewer line and a water line, so now we're gonna incur more money just in order.
I think it would
Our
just
goal
make-
with what we're proposing today was, okay, we had an original contract amount, which with the contractor, for the 3.2 million. We're realizing a savings of about 650,000. We're recommending adding additional work in order to stay within that $3.2 million budget. I mean, if the council wants to ask Reeds, we can try to find additional monies in order to do that, but we'd have to come back and present it to council again, and maybe shift monies from another budget into additional street work.
So it's actually 2 blocks, but there is sewer and water, but there's no gas. The gas is in the alley, but there's sewer and water, so we have to address sewer and water too, so that's gonna add to the cost.
It would just make, to me, I mean, when I see North Willow, I'm seeing North Willow.
Well, but if you drive North Willow right now, from Athol to Pena has been done since Pena to Colorado's been done. That portion of it was redone, before, and that's why, so we have 2 different kinds of work that we're actually doing on that street.
Okay, yeah.
We're gonna redo that portion too, the north part too, so that, because we gotta do the trunk line. But it's different than what we're doing on the lower part. So they were done at different times.
I mean, as far as direction from council, you just let us know as far as what you want us to look into above and beyond what we're looking at right here.
I'm still concerned about Moreno Street, and I'm still concerned about that water. Is there any way you could possibly take a survey or go out there and you know, with your engineering expertise, actually, you know, let us know where exactly that water's coming from, and if so, when you find that out, we could address that issue. If it's coming from those apartments, you know, because it's going to be no use if we fix that street, and then the water's going to tear it up again.
I was about to.
You know, so we need to find the cause of that water, you know, and if before we spend any money on that street, I think we need to address the issue where that water's coming from.
Do you have to wait till it
That's a very
rains?
good point. I mean, I have to wait till it rains.
Robert, do you have access to historical aerial photography? So we can look at today's aerial photo and one from 20 years ago, one from 20 years ago, and figure out what's been added in, and maybe.
But there hasn't really been any development on to the west of the complex, right?
I'm gonna make a suggestion that Councilman Hernandez goes with you guys one day, and he could explain, because unless you're gonna wait till it rains, and God knows when it's gonna rain, well, he knows, but you know.
Well, I've
I've
been
been
there,
told the same
I've been there when the water's jumping over and it's going through the neighborhood and the drains are off to the side and they're dry.
But where's the water coming from?
From uptown, you know, I mean.
There's a pump upstairs that pumps it into the street.
I've been there, but before we started the project, and that whole area was completely flooded. Because all that water runs down that street. I don't know what the street
From
is.
where?
Huh?
You say from a pump?
Comes from
No.
Jalisco.
Everything comes in from
apartments.
Colorado, from the apartments, and then.
Oh, when it rains, it pulls together and then.
Pulls it in there, and that, I mean, before we put that drainage in there, that whole area was underwater for weeks. Even when we were working, and we weren't done yet, we were stopped, because it was everything was flowing over. What we've added in there, I mean, it's done, it's improved a lot of improvements.
I mean, that is a low area, I mean,
It is a low area.
it might take time for water to get out of there, but it should get out of that area. As far as going over the curb, I haven't seen it, but I know I've been told several
Yeah, Chubby brought it up.
citizens that I think Kobe mentioned it also that occurs, but I can say pretty much 100% certainty, it's nothing that the adding the curb and gutter and the additional storm sewer would have, that wouldn't have created the situation. It would only help.
So Robert, your drains that you have on the side of the street right now, those are sized to match the storm holders. So if they're flowing 100%, the culvert's 100% full, we couldn't make the drains bigger?
No, the limiting factor is actually TxDOT. Because all that goes to TxDOT. And TxDOT put in, so at the intersection, they put in those inlets at the intersection.
The only thing I can, sometimes, and I've seen it happen, is when TxDOT, when you have a very heavy rain and it piles up with debris, then you start seeing all the drains bubbling because it's backed up. And so all those that come in, they're not gonna flow out because theirs is bigger.
However, it's not at the intersection though, where that water is flowing from.
Oh, no, I understand. I'm
He's
saying
talking
what's
about that on
flowing.
the road.
Oh.
Yeah, it's on
Yeah,
the
it's
road.
on the road.
Downstream.
Right.
And actually, TxDOT improved their drainage system and they increased the amount of inlets or whatever, controls that they have there at that intersection. I don't know if you stand up there the past 10, 12 years or something like that. So that water should hit that curb and the TxDOT inlet should accept as much water as it can till it fills up, and then that's the only way I can see it overflowing the curb, is if the TxDOT system has exceeded its capacity. Because if not, then it should just all get into the inlet.
And if the TxDOT system's met its
If
capacity,
the TxDOT system has met its capacity, then
at their mercy.
Yes, sir.
and we could go shoot elevations.
I think what I've seen is that curve where the water runs into, that curve may not be a solid curve. It may have like a, like.
Oh, like a cutoff or driveway or
Yeah.
something sort of?
It may have a couple of those, and I think that's where the water may be going through.
But see, that curve, we didn't address that curve, or we didn't look at that curve, we didn't, did we?
No, that's a brand new curb. but-
Is it on this street? No, it's not. It was only going up, wasn't
That's
it?
right, it was only going up, yeah.
That curve has been there prior.
So those driveways, some of them have, some houses have 2 or 3 driveways, but it's people cut out themselves. So we could, want to put a curb in there.
What we can do is, we'll get the surveyors out and we'll take elevation shots from the inlet all the way back to that curve and just say.
Figure out the problem first.
Yeah.
Figure out the problem first. I mean, I don't mind, getting that street paved, but, we're gonna be back to square one in a year or 2 years down the road because the problem was never addressed.
I agree with you.
And it's irrelevant whether you repave it or fix it with a pothole patch, it's the same thing. If that water's still standing there, it's gonna.
Yeah, if you don't fix the drainage, it's just, it's not gonna last that long.
Okay.
Yes.
But my next question is, how long are we gonna wait till we get something done about this? 'Cause
I can shoot,
We can-
not this week, next week, we'll give it to surveyors, we'll just have them total the area. And then we'll look at it and say, hey, this is what we think is the situation. If I can see, or if you can see, just based on the elevations, that the inlet, the curb inlet with TxDOT is lower than the actual curve, then that water should get from that one area before it goes over the curb into the inlet. And then when the inlet fills up, I mean, there's nothing we can do with the TxDOT drainage system. But if there is all I'm saying is that if there's an elevation difference between the curb and the inlet, then that water should not flow over the curb. I mean,
Unless we're getting way
it's
too
as
much.
simple as that.
Unless we're getting way too much water for the capacity of the system.
Yeah, but if it's a driveway, what do we do? It's their driveway.
Well, if it's a driveway, if there is a cut in the curb, then we can make a recommendation to council that, look, if we're gonna talk to the citizens and say, hey, we can put a full height curb to try to prevent that water from overflowing into your property.
A speed bump curve instead of a regular low cut curve.
But then again, if there's a lot of water, because there's a lot of water that comes down through
That's a
there.
lot of water.
So if the waters are coming from the apartments, that could also contribute if, do they have a drain for all that runoff or?
It goes into this concrete basin, and then there's pumps that pump it into.
Somebody's property.
Yeah, and then
It comes back
it comes to
into-
somebody's property. It was approved by the city council.
How is that possible? I mean,
We brought that up.
Mayor came to the city council meeting before today.
no.
So you're pretty much asking, you're stuck with the actions of your previous, and that was, how long did that farm been there, 15, 20 years?
18 years, I think, 18 years. Before we were here.
So that's why it floods over by ATM furniture? That's true.
No, I don't,
No.
I'm just saying that's
Contributes.
a contributing factor. But when it rains, and the other contributing factor, and big one is TxDOT's storm sewer system. They don't design their storm sewer systems to handle all of the city's incoming flow.
And if you ever look at it, right, that property that's empty, he's never been able to build there because of the, it floods through his property all the time. And if you look at the street where when it comes off the curb, it always has dirt and rocks and everything, is all over and off that property.
Where is this?
On,
The north side.
Trevino Street.
You'll see that intersection. That's why when we went in there, we went ahead and did it thicker, so we did that small.
Any other
Where's
questions?
the next drain after that?
Everything flows out to
It's, they're on Comal, right?
Garcia, all the way to Mount.
Those are the only drains I saw on Comal.
That's a long way.
I'm telling you, that street channels all that water down.
It just builds up and it should flow down that way. From all streets. But in order for it to flow over, then that means the whole street has to pretty much be for, and it has to be,
Unless it's curb cuts.
that's curb cuts, yeah.
I think it's a
I don't
curb-
recall curb cuts, but I could be wrong.
Curb problem.
Curb problem. We can look at it, and we'll shoot elevations, we can shoot elevations. That's a real simple look at it.
So if it's something like that, there's money right now to be able to maybe get that fixed and the street fixed.
Curb probably.
Yes, I mean, if the curb is just lower, then you can fix the curb, but then you still have the situation where if the TxDOT storm sewer fills up, then it's gonna take a little bit of time for it to get out. So it might still mess up the street, but not.
Yes.
How about installing a pump?
Where you pump it to.
Well,
Out of the street.
Back to the park house.
So you're gonna recycle it? Yeah, the problem with the pump is like, yeah, you can pump it back in the TxDOT storm sewer system, they won't let you, I think, but if they're just full, then
Yeah.
it's gonna come back, not a problem. I think that I mean, you can fix the curb, but I think that is a bigger issue than just, it has to do with TxDOT and the sizing of their storm sewer system.
Because at the same token, I mean, that road is being destroyed too. I mean, Trevino Street is being destroyed because all that excess water is flowing through there, I mean, when it rains and so on and so forth. So we're gonna have a bigger issue in the future.
I mean, pretty much, that street pretty much acts as like a drainage drain.
That's where it is.
Madam Mayor,
I mean, the only thing that's saving you right now is the perfect weather that we have.
Yes, sir.
Just one other thing real quick, we should have talked about this at the first, and we did, and I apologize. Part of the reason we sent out the message and asked everybody if you can meet tonight is because the fact that we're finishing up the portion that we have right now means all these guys are gonna leave town. And so if we add stuff now, we get to keep them here, we don't have a mobilization fee. So that's why we wanted to try to push the projects forward that we thought were important, because we cut that cost out by keeping them here and keeping them working. And I should have mentioned that up front. It's not that we're just trying to grab stuff and spend money, it's we're trying to save money by keeping them here and keeping them working rather than paying them to mobilize and come back again. But if it's a council's pleasure to pick 3/4 of this and say, okay, at the February meeting, let's have an elevation report so we can try to figure out the rest of it and decide whether it's gonna be one or the other. And that's fine too, that'll keep them busy until the council meeting for sure. But we got time to do that.
Well, my suggestion is, it's up to the council, of course, to vote, is just to do this project. Of course, like you said, we won't have money left over for South Moreno after you survey, we'll try to see what the problem is, because it may be something simple as what Councilman Edelman has said occurred. So we'll have something concrete and get this finished, and it's done. I mean, you're gonna do Willow, Hackberry, Encino, Colorado.
And
So
all of Colorado, they thought of Colorado with.
that's just my suggestion. Put the two guys to make decisions.
And we're staying within that original $3.2 million.
Yes.
And part of that would be going ahead and letting out the bid for the truck line project first. We haven't let that bid out yet.
Any other discussion? If not, we'll close out the workshop.
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Robert.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are on item 5A. Discussion and possible action regarding project budget 2016 certificate of obligation. This is an action item. Need to entertain a motion to discuss, please.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So Madam Mayor, Council, before you have the proposals to add the additional work to the existing agreement with construction for Hackberry and Encino, water services on Encino, North Willow Street and the water line on North Willow Street, and the additional cost to LMV, which would come out of the existing contract that's already been let to a company putting out the other bid that you guys have already approved, and the small purchase for the sewer line on North Beach Street, recommending you approve. And you can add in, if you guys want to add in rental now, or wording saying we'll look at it and figure out what it's going to be, however you guys want to do that. We're going to look at it. It doesn't take action, it's an action item for the council for us to get out there and figure it out.
We're just switching to others. We're gonna look at it and let you know what you think is going on. If it's a current problem or whatever.
And we'll have a report on that at the February meeting. I'll get on the agenda.
Need to entertain a motion to address this.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve North Willow Street, the 8th Lane, and also the West Colorado, with the exception of striking out Hackberry, Hackberry and Encino Avenue. Hackberry Street?
Have you not seen Hackberry?
Hackberry and
Hackberry's horrible.
Yes.
Right in front of the
Please,
hospital?
no.
Okay, never mind. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, to approve as is. To approve as is, with the exception of South Moreno, to go ahead and take a look into.
Okay, there is a motion on the table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
I abstain. Madam Mayor.
Ben abstains. All righty, we're moving on to 5B, discussion and possible action regarding recent fire at the neighborhood center. It's probably just more of a discussion, is it?
That's all it's on there is for discussion.
Okay,
But we have it as an action item, there won't be any action.
just discussion, yes.
Madam Mayor, Council, just kind of an update on where we're at with the, since the last time we met. We did have the demolition crew from TML come in and meet with city staff and the person that's doing the assessment of the facility for TML, so that they could do their demolition costs, which TML has their own crew to do that, so they can mobilize them quicker, and they have a contract where it's cheaper, all that stuff. Since they're the insurance, if they choose to use them, we're gonna have to let them use them, and that's fine. They are supposed to have numbers finished by this Friday. The demolition crew definitely said they would have their numbers by this Friday. The assessor is planning on having his numbers to TML by this Friday for the building. We have given, in a separate stack, we have given the TML representative our information on the contents that we have in the building as well. We had about $105,000 in insurance on contents. We stopped at quotes for about $177,000 worth of equipment. He told us not to do any more because he didn't think we needed to do any more because he didn't figure that it would depreciate more than 25%. We did not include costs for the library equipment we had in there. We had a few other items that we never got to. Library equipment was probably about $30,000 worth of bookshelves and books and chairs and tables. But he said he figured that was sufficient to meet the full insurance, which was $105,000. We did receive a check from TML. I requested that TML send us a partial payment on the contents early because we do have our voting equipment in there. Everything that we have for elections was in there. Voting booths, tables, all that stuff was in there. Also, all of our supplies for the summer rec program were in there, and we know we needed to get started getting those replaced. So we did receive a check from TML for $50,000 to start replacing contents already, and we'll deal with that in the next action item on how we're planning on doing that. So at this point, we're waiting on a Friday number to be given to TML for what the person considers the value of the building to be. So my understanding at this point, the TML insurance policy has a value on that building of a little over $2 million. And that's a total, it's not, you remember, this is a risk pool, this isn't insurance, so they say the building's 100% lost, we don't necessarily just get $2 million handed to us. So what they will do is they will look at the cost to replace it. And if the cost to replace it are less, or say the cost to replace it are above that 2.05, I think is what it is on the insurance, then we get the full 2.05 if we replace the building. If the cost to replace it is less, which very possibly will be, then two things happen. TML takes the value that he says it would cost to replace the physical building itself, just like it was, at today's building, not just like it was, but it would be a fully functional building today's standards. And then they depreciate that based on the age and life and use of the existing building. The appraiser, assessor person did tell us that because it was brick and mortar, because most of the building was solid, that he didn't assume that the depreciation would be as high as we were probably anticipating, but he wasn't sure. They said it doesn't have anything to do. He kept talking to us about the fact that it was all storage and nobody was actually physically using the building. So when he came back, we did two things with him. One, we sat down with him and said, we may not have had anybody in there, but based on what's happened with the Meals on Wheels program, we would have had somebody in there today if the building was available. So it wasn't usable. He said, no. He said, that's irrelevant in the depreciation value of it. He said, it doesn't make any difference. So, okay, so we got that cleared up. Second thing we did was, Xavier and I talked to the assessor person, and the demolition guy was actually very helpful in this. There's an answer system in that building for the kitchen. The answer systems being the hood and the suppression system, which you have to have if you have a commercial type kitchen. It was a big answer system that was in that building. He had told us we had to have that covered under contents. And when we started talking about it, because it was tied into the building, the demolition guy said, no, you can do that as part of the building and not part of the contents. So we got him to move that from the contents portion to the building portion. So that'll be another $50-something thousand that we'll get towards the building, and it didn't have to eat up part of our replacement cost for all the equipment that we had, and the equipment and storage stuff we had in there too. So that was a big help that day, getting that switched over to the other side. It means at the end of the day, we'll get $55,000 more than we would have got to begin with. So they will depreciate it, and they will say, okay, this is what you get. Now, my understanding at this point, and we've heard this from everybody, is once that comes in, then the city can decide to do whatever they want with it. They can build another building someplace else, whatever. I mean, it's irrelevant to TML at that point. If the city chooses to go back and build the same thing, then not only do we get that portion, but we get the depreciation back to the full value of the building so we can replace the building. I have asked for clarification that if we chose to build a similar type building but not at the same location, would we get the depreciation back also? So if we chose to build something, because it was basically being used as a neighborhood center, a community center, if we chose to build something at another location but the same thing, would we get the depreciation also? And they're trying to get an answer on that. So we haven't been told no, but we haven't been told yes at this point. So I think after this Friday, we'll probably have some more answers as to what we're really looking at and where we can go from there. The demolition, he did rule the building 100% loss. That includes the walls and the foundation, because of the smoke damage, the heat damage, and everything else. It would be complete removal of everything that's there. The two little outer buildings did not really receive any damage in the fire, so what they told us they would do in the demolition bid is basically come back and say, okay, the demolition of this part costs this much and your insurance covers this, but while we're here, we can do these two little pieces for an extra little bit too, if you guys want those removed too. And basically do it as an add-on where the city would pay for the removal of the two other little pieces that you roll into all the time. And it would be, we'd have to pay mobilization rate, that's already going to be here anyway. So we'll look at that when that comes in. So that bid will actually have the TML portion that TML will pay plus X number of dollars that the city chooses to have the rest of them removed. We can do that as well. We also asked about if we didn't rebuild that, we'll rebuild something that had a similar purpose. So no, we don't want to rebuild a community center, but we want to build a skate park, or we want to build something else that's still a community park of some kind to help. Do we get the depreciation from that too? And I didn't get a no to that either, but I did get a yes. So I think that's going to be a matter of going up there and sitting down and talking to them and convincing them to say yes. But as of Friday, Monday, somewhere in there, we should have some more answers. And I'll let you guys know as we get to it.
Okay. Any questions?
Madam Mayor, 18th, what, do we hear a response from the city on their, from the school on their request?
The response essentially was that they they had their assessment done, they did not get the results. And we asked that they share them with us. And we told them that we would be likewise to share what we found out that needed to be done, and we would also be asking them to participate financially if they chose to do so. So we're basically, we've agreed to share information once we receive it.
But so they never have divulged where they got the information that there was environmental?
No, they just said they went ahead, they decided to get an assessment done. They don't have results, and they didn't share those with us or the cost either.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Not, we're going to move on to 5C. Discussion and possible action regarding ordinance number 018-01-03, amending the adopted budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2017. This is an action item. You can entertain a motion to discuss, please. Motion. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Mayor, Council, before you, this ordinance 2018-0103 in the fiscal budget for this fiscal year. We do have a line item in that budget that we call TML insurance. If we have a claim on a building, or if we have an auto accident, or somebody, does something to destroy our buildings, whenever we turn in a claim to the insurance, and we get money back from the insurance, that's the line item we normally put in. For instance, year before last at the Thanksgiving luncheon, where we had the two employees that were coming in, the young man ran the stop sign and hit the vehicle. We got a check from TML for like $10,000 for that vehicle. So we normally will have one or two small claims during the year, so we have a small line item there so we can receive it and put it to use. Obviously, this, with the neighborhood center, there's going to be a lot more money coming in this year than what we had anticipated in the budget. So we are 100, well, not 100%, but based on what we've been told, we're pretty sure we're going to get the full $105,000 from the contents. So there has to be some place in the budget for that money to be put in and for us to be able to spend it to buy the stuff for the parks program, or buy the stuff for the voting and buy all the rest of the stuff that we lost in there. So this budget adjustment would increase the revenue in that TML line item, or under insurance claims. It would increase the revenue by $105,000, which is the total contents insurance that we have on the building. And then it would also increase the expenditures by $105,000 so we can start purchasing the replacement stuff.
Yes.
Are we gonna wait till the money comes in, or do you need to set that up to prepare a place for
We
it?
have a check for half of it sitting there waiting for this line item to be able to do it.
So we need to do it now?
Yeah, and we could purchase, I could purchase stuff right now. I mean, we have unspent budget. We could purchase stuff, but then we're spending money in those departments that's meant for something else. And then we're gonna have to go back in and receive the money and make a budget adjustment here, and a budget adjustment there, and a budget adjustment there, and it's just easier to do it this way.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2018-0103.
There's a motion, may I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Item D, discussion and possible action regarding setting date, time, and location for the possible quarterly town hall meeting. Action item, entertain a motion to discuss, please.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This was a request, at the last city council came from the mayor, I'm not remember where it came from, I think. Anyway, the request to start setting up some of the workshops again, because it's been a while since we had one. So, it's been 6 months since we had a town hall, maybe a little bit longer.
Town hall?
Yeah, we had about 6 months, I think we did it in July, if I remember. So it's been 6 months, so if the council wants to have another one, we'll set a time and date for it right now.
We had discussed having them quarterly. Stay on track, I guess.
So we have February
What's that
coming
one?
up,
What's good?
15th. We want it Tuesday, we want it Thursday. Wednesday is church night.
Thursday.
Thursday? So we have the 8th, 15th, 22nd.
I think for these meetings, we almost have to go on Thursday, because with the annexation and all that, we'll probably have to use the Tuesdays quite a bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about that after this. But if you want to do the 8th or the 15th or the 22nd, none of those dates will interfere with the timeline that will be proposed for the annexation. So those 3 Thursdays are open.
That's Valentine, no, that's the 14th.
That's a Wednesday.
Okay.
15th?
So the 15th?
15th.
I'm gonna be out. I mean,
Yeah, I'll be out of state.
All of that week, the 18th?
I'll be coming back, well, I'll be coming back on the 20th, the morning of the 20th.
So the 22nd?
That'll work.
22nd.
That'll work.
February, your calendar is February 22nd. Town hall meeting.
Time?
7,
7? Here or the library?
library. What time did we say? 7.
At the library. So you need to take action on setting that date.
Okay. So we need to entertain a motion to set that date, please.
And Mayor, I make a motion that we have the next town hall meeting on February 22nd at 7 PM at the library.
Can I have a second, please? There's a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, moving on to discussion and possible, which is E, discussion and possible action regarding for master plan workshop, okay. Setting dates, time, and location for a master plan workshop. Action item, need to entertain a motion to discuss, please.
Motion to discuss. Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Same thing, it's been a while since we had one. At some point, we're gonna get through that and get the master plan started. If we set a date this time, we'll try to have somebody from the planning unit at UTSA here. As we discussed at the last one, that's what we talked about, was getting them to come to the next one. I've talked to a couple of people at UTSA that do that, so we'll get them here.
We have March, first, these are all Thursdays, of course. First, 8, 15, 22nd, 29th. These are all.
I mean, Madam Mayor, just for the sake of conversation, could we not do it in conjunction with the town hall? I mean, just for the sake of conversation, team?
They could, I mean, at some point in your master plan, you get the public involved. I mean, you have to. I don't know. I think actually, though, I think our first master plan workshop with somebody from UTSA needs to be more about a back and forth with the council and that facilitator and not with the public. So that facilitator can help the council understand what we need to do next, where we need to go. So I think the first one probably would be better to be separate.
What was the first Thursday?
Thursday is the first, 8, 15, 22nd, 29th. Those are all Thursdays.
March 1st?
First?
Yeah.
Spring break is what?
Yeah, that's the second.
It's the second week.
So third week, second week?
First full week or?
Yeah, we'll skip that week. And spring break is.
The spring break's the 5th through the 9th or the 12th through the 16th?
Let's just do the first.
March 1st?
Yeah.
Is that good for everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Need a motion?
Yes.
location.
Okay, I move that we hold the next master plan workshop on March 1st at 7 p.m. here.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion, that was the second by Robert? Or?
Yeah.
Briscoe.
That's here at City Hall? Okay.
Here?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous. All righty, we're moving on to discussion of possible action regarding setting dates time for joint workshop with Frio County. Entertain a motion to discuss, please.
Motion? Second.
All in favor?
Madam Mayor, before you guys start discussing this one, I'd like to bring up a couple of points on this one that I think we really need to consider. One, Mayor and I met with representatives of the county on Monday.
Monday, yes.
For those of you who have not heard, the Frio County Meals on Wheels program lost its funding. It's funded through February 23rd, I believe. And that's the last day of the funding, and we're trying to find an avenue to continue the program. We had one meeting up there with one of the commissioners, the judge, the mayor and I, a few staff members, and sat around and talked about alternatives with ACOG. It looks like we may have a good alternative, which is Medina, the Medina program out of Hondo picking it up. And at some point we may have to look at some kind of budgetary help for them or whatever, but that issue is gonna have to be addressed before the 23rd. The judge also mentioned in that meeting that they are talking to the EMS group right now, because we know this year is the year of the EMS contract.
Oh, yes.
And it sounds like they've already told that group they're not gonna renew, and they're talking to the hospital about picking it back up. There's 2 or 3 big things that we're gonna have to talk to the county about, but I think the county doesn't have answers yet. So setting a date, my point is that we set a date and say we wanna do it this date, and we may do that and then turn around and we later have to meet with them again. So it might be best to send this to the county.
Let them set, yeah.
And then us try to conform to that date. Because I think they know a little bit better about when they're gonna have answers to those things than we do. What do you guys hope?
So no action.
Can we table it or?
And you can table it because we
Yeah.
asked them for a date.
Motion to table. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous. Item G, updating regarding annexation proposal.
Madam Mayor, Council, just wanted to give you an update. We all got together before the meeting tonight. At the February 8th meeting, we will have everything updated to maps, a new resolution, everything ready to go to lay out the timeline to start moving forward. So that will be available at the, we'll have that as an action item on the agenda for the regular meeting in February. It's about a 120-day process, about 120, somewhere in there. We're done way before the necessary timelines for next tax season. When we bring it to you, we're gonna talk about a couple of things, because at this point, we're gonna recommend a 2-step annexation this year, because that's the only way that we get where we need to go, because of some statutory limitations that are on us. So we'll have it in February. Just want to give you guys an update, because I know you guys had asked about it. So we'll have the full thing ready for you in February. That's a regular meeting.
What did you recommend?
We're gonna have to recommend a 2-step process. So we have plenty of time to get it done.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to 6, executive session, for the Texas Government Code, Chapter 501, Subsection B, 11074, discussion of the city manager's contract. Should we take a motion to go into executive session?
Motion?
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Time is 8:05. 8:02 was by... 8:05. Need to entertain a motion to return from executive session.
Motion to return from executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Time is 8:28. There's no action taken in executive session. So we're moving on to item 7A, discussion of possible action regarding the city manager's contract. Need to entertain a motion, please?
Motion. Second.
Motion to
Discuss the city manager's contract.
okay. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. No, you can't, no, the discussion.
Yeah, we just made a motion to discuss.
Okay, is there any discussion?
All right, there it is, discussion.
There we go.
The contents of the contract is basically the same as we discussed last week. There were a couple of errors on the contract that we're going to change. Other than that, everything stays the same. Question?
So can I make a motion?
Sure.
Motion to approve the contract with the minor revisions as section 5, section 5B, to include the salary review may allow city council to review the employee's performance and provide a salary increase between 5 and 10%. So my motion is to strike the word will and use the word may.
Okay.
Strike the will.
And then 2B, and 2B, the same,
Yes, and to be the same.
and 7D,
And also correct 7D to instead of the TML retirement program, make that TMR retirement.
MRS.
TMR.
That's all.
Okay, there's a motion on the table.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. General announcements?
I'd like to comment.
Yes.
Good. Well done, team. We appreciate your job. You're doing a good job.
Thanks. Thank you, sir. No announcements?
General announcements?
I have one. Maybe the December council meeting, it might have been a January council meeting, I don't remember which one it was. I informed the council that our finance director and our volunteer firefighter, who's sitting back on the back row, had completed and submitted a 2018 Emergency Responder Health and Wellness Grant. We received notice today that there were 105 applications requesting over $447,000, and I think they had $250,000 total that they could give out. The department had, the two of them in the form had requested equipment totaling $5,000, and their grant application was approved for $3,000. So with that $3,000, we'll be purchasing a Kaiser force sled. So for those of you that have been out to the safety day and seen the firefighter challenge, that's the deal they stand on the hill with the hammer. It teaches them how to break into buildings and builds up their stamina for breaking through walls and doing stuff like that. And it just so happens that machine was $3,000. I think that's why they gave us the $3,000, because that was the biggest piece of equipment that we asked for. We will be ordering that in the morning, and as soon as we get it and get the receipts, we send it to them and they reimburse us. So they'll have it pretty quick. Good job. Good job.
What a team. Excellent team.
Congratulations. That's the only announcement?
That's all I can remember.
See you tomorrow.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Time is